Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Great Leadership. My guest today is Randy Parker. He's the Chief Executive Officer at Hyundai Motor America. And today we're going to be talking about a few different things. We're going to look at Randy's general background, how he got to where he is. We're going to put an accurate perspective and lens on leadership, because a lot of people out there want to know, what does it take to get into a leadership role? And yes, there are sacrifices. Yes, you do need to work hard. Yes, occasionally you do need to put in those late nights or those early mornings. So we're going to paint an accurate picture of what that looks like. We'll talk about the importance of hard work and determination, some KPIs that might be good for leaders to use for themselves to figure out if they're good leaders or not. And then we're going to hopefully get into how to think about the future, because Randy's involved in an industry, vehicles that's changing all the time. We've talked about autonomous vehicles. Now we're talking about EVs, and there's just a lot going on. So how does Randy think about the future as the CEO of an organization? And at the very end, for the Leaders Toolkit section, we're going to talk about how to build a personal brand and why that's so important, even if you have a full-time job. So Randy, with all that being said, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Jacob, good morning, and thanks for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about just the business that you run. Can you give people a little bit of context around the business? So how many employees do you guys have? How much revenue are you guys bringing in? What exactly are you responsible for as the CEO? And any numbers that you can share?
Sure. I'll try not to get into, I'll try to keep it very high level opposed to going into a lot of number detail, because there's some things that we don't like to talk about publicly. But
got it.
Obviously here in the United States, we've got over a couple of thousand U.S. employees that I'm responsible for, and we're in the business of selling cars. It's not very complicated, right? We're selling cars, we're satisfying customers, and we're making money on a daily basis. And obviously, there's a lot that goes into that in terms of customer satisfaction, in terms of product line management, in terms of product planning, in terms of after sales, working with our dealer partners. It's easy, and yet it can be very complicated at the exact same time. But it's a great business. I've been doing this now for over 34 years. I've worked for 3 different automotive companies. I was with General Motors for 22 years. I was with Nissan for 7, and I'm coming up on my 5th year with Hyundai. So I think I've saved the best for last. But it's a great business. It's like a village. There's so much that's going on in this village. You've got finance, you've got after sales, you've got marketing, you've got advertising, you've got customer satisfaction. Yep. And obviously, you've got the art of selling cars and SUVs and EVs in the marketplace. And so it's a great business. It's a fun business. It's an exciting business, and it's forever changing.
And how much revenue, just if we can, I don't know if you're able to share this, but when people think about kind of the scale of the business, right? So you have a couple thousand employees, and what's the annual revenue for you guys?
In general, it's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $30 billion in revenue.
Okay, so we're talking about a massive...
So it's pretty significant. It's pretty significant. I don't want to get into profit margins and
no.
So on and so forth, because again, I don't want to make any proclamations, but nevertheless, I would say 30 billion in revenue on an annual basis it will get you in the ballpark.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, just so people can get a sense of how big of a business we're talking about. So a couple thousand employees, somewhere
in the
$30 billion range, larger than, I would say, the majority of organizations that are out there until you get to the really massive ones out there. So how did you get
100%? And we're selling over 800,000 cars, just Hyundai alone. And if you add in Genesis, you're talking about 900,000 cars. On our way to selling almost 1 million in the marketplace. So 800,000 cars. $30 billion in revenue, and we're making good profit, let's just say.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how you got into this role. So you mentioned you've been in the business for 34 years. I know you have a very strong background in sales, and people who are familiar with sales know that it's a very cutthroat space to be in, right? You can't hide. Either you bring in revenue or you don't. Either you close deals or you don't. So what was your experience going through sales? What did it teach you, and how did it prepare you to become the CEO?
Well, like a lot of kids coming right out of college, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to be, and it all started with a payment booklet, believe it or not. I was at a job fair, and my father used to make his car payment through GMAC, which was General Motors Acceptance Corporation, which was the finance arm of General Motors at the time. And back in the day, 34 years ago, right, we used to make our car payments using a payment booklet, right? You wrote out your check, you took out the coupon, you stuck it in the mail, and that's how you made your car payment. And so at the job fair, one of the booths was GMAC. One of the companies that was there was GMAC, and I thought to myself, "Oh wow, I know this company. Let me go over and chat with them." Right, and one thing led to another, and that's how I got my foot in the door. And from there, I got the bug. You know, I got the bug of selling cars, which I think is pretty fascinating. I was never one of those guys that wanted to tinker on a car. You know, even to this day, I don't sit there and want to change the oil or turn a wrench, or get my hands dirty. But I love the art of cars themselves. You know, if the car looks good, if it's got great design, great technology, that's what fascinates me about the car business. But at the same time, I also got into the art of working with our dealer partners to sell cars, which I think is really, really important. You know, here in the U.S., we've got 840 strong Hyundai dealers that we go to market with. And I feel like I go to war with these guys every single day against the competition. And so, the other part of the car business is just being competitive, right? It's us versus our key competitors, and we're in a dogfight with every single model, our brand, every single day, and it's hand-to-hand combat with our dealers, and I think we do it quite well. We're not perfect, but we're making a lot of really good progress in the marketplace. But being able to compete is something I was taught early on. I played basketball my entire life. I played basketball at Texas Christian University at a D1 level. We won the Southwest Conference Championship back in '86 and '87, and so the art of competing and winning was just something that was innate in me. And so when I got into the car business, the cool thing about the car business is that we run in 30-day cycles. We run in 30-day sprints. Okay, what's our target for the month? Here's a number, let's go get after it, right? And so achieving KPIs and performance is something that even to this day I get really excited about, right? So just competing on a daily basis, hitting select KPIs was something that was very important to me. And at the end of the day, I like to see my name in lights. Call it being proudful, call it being full of pride. But at the end of the day, I like to see my name in lights. It's no different than when we're playing back in college. You like the art of winning, right?
Yeah.
We want to win a championship. If you win a championship, you get your name in lights. And it's the same thing in the car business. We achieve hitting our number and our targets and our KPIs every single month. We get our name in lights. And that's really, really motivating for me.
So I have two questions on that. So one is, how do you cultivate that mindset in your employees? Because it seems like some people have that winning mindset. Other people don't, either maybe because they didn't play sports, they didn't grow up in that kind of environment, they don't believe in that kind of environment, whatever it might be. And second, there was a report that came out from Deloitte, I don't know, a few weeks ago, earlier this year, and they were talking about that traditional KPIs in business, they predicted this as one of their trends that they're going to see shifting, that traditional KPIs no longer make sense because a lot of employees do work that's not tangible, like you don't see it, right? Like thinking, creativity, collaboration, emotional intelligence, coaching and mentoring, like those are things that a lot of people do that don't have traditional metrics and KPIs by them, right? So it's not like, oh, I sold 5 cars or 10 cars. Like, how do you quantify that? So sort of a two-part question. One is, how do you cultivate that winning mindset in your people? And what do you do, for example, if you work with somebody who's just like, hey, Randy, I'm glad that worked for you. I'm all about peace and love. I don't want to compete with anybody. I just want to chill. I went to the University of California, Santa Cruz. So there was a lot of that mindset where I went to college, and I was just wanting to like rip everyone's head off. And the second part of that is, what do you do with these different KPIs? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And first and foremost, as much as I like to compete, I like to chill and take it easy as well. So I think it's about culture, right? And what you just talked about is establishing a culture. And I think you can do those things where you can have peace and chill and relax, but at the same time still compete, right? It's about the culture that you create within the in the walls here at Hyundai. But first and foremost, what's really, really important, before you start to win, before you start to focus on KPIs, and this is something I tell my mentees all the time. I am a mentor at the TCU Neely School of Business, and what I tell my mentees all the time is, don't worry so much about winning. Don't worry so much about making money right now. Find something that you're passionate about. That's really, really important. I don't care what it is, but find something that you're passionate about. Because the old saying is, if you enjoy what you do, you'll never work a day in your life,
Yeah.
right? You spend 80% of the time at work, the other 20% of the time thinking about work.
Yep.
So you better be happy with the people that you work with and the company that you work for. So first and foremost, that's really, really critical. So before you join an organization, before you join a company, make sure you do your homework, because you want to make sure that you're a good fit, right? Based on the culture that's already within the building. So I think that's first and foremost, is finding your true passion. The second thing is that at the end of the day, it's not a beauty pageant, right? You have to perform. This is not Little League soccer where everybody gets a trophy. At the end of the day, we're judged by our results. I talked about those 30-day sprints. Well, those 30-day sprints add up to a calendar year sprint, and that's your performance, right? Every single month. And of course, we've got a litany, an array of KPIs that we chase on a monthly basis. But at the end of the day, we're judged by our results, okay? And you can't argue with the numbers. The numbers are the numbers, and the numbers are universal. The numbers are different in any language, but they're still the same, right?
Yeah.
They're factual. So always speak with numbers and always speak with data. And so that's the kind of culture that we've created in here, is that, hey, we want to let's not get fixated on the art of achieving a KPI, but let's get fixated on the art of the process of achieving a KPI.
I love that.
Teamwork, esprit de corps, passion, performing, elevating yourself. These are all things that are extremely important within the halls of a company, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, no, I love that. I the fact that there's still a focus on performance and numbers, I think especially now, I'm a big believer. A lot of the emotional intelligence stuff, all that stuff is great, but at the end of the day, like you said, performance matters. I had a question for you about passion, because there's sort of like conflicting sides to this, right? On the one hand, some people say always follow your passion, because like you said, then you're never going to work a day in your life. But then the flip side of that is there are a lot of people who are passionate about singing, about basketball, about chess, about who knows what, who are never going to make a career out of those things. So what's the difference between identifying your passion versus pursuing that and trying to make that, a career? For example, you were clearly passionate about basketball, but you're not in the NBA. I'm very passionate about chess. I'm not a professional chess grandmaster. Or, I love racquetball. I'm not a professional racquetball player. So how do you balance this idea of passion versus turning it into something that is your career? Yeah. So how do you balance that out?
Yeah, I mean, that's another really great question. It's called self-awareness. And I'll give you an example. When I was playing basketball, I knew at the start of my sophomore year that I wasn't going to play in the NBA. Because I saw, what it took to get to that level. And as good as I thought I was, I just knew innately that I don't think I've got what it takes to get to that level. No matter how much I practice, no matter how many shots a day that I put up, I'm just not that skillful to get to that level, right? And having strong self-awareness is also very, very important, right? So that you identify what you're really capable of, and being able to pivot and move your cheese and go in a different direction. And you've got to be able to be mature enough to be able to do that, right? Because there's some people that have their blinders on and just say, no matter what, I want to be a basketball player, I want to be a football player, I want to be a chess player. That's great. Then keep pursuing those things, right? But just recognize the consequence of your actions. And I wasn't ready to sacrifice me getting started on a career pursuing something that I thought was, you know what, I'm going to be good, but it's hard for me to be great to get to that level of playing in the NBA. It's just hard. Physically, I just don't have what it takes. And so I knew early on that I was good, but I wasn't going to play in the NBA. And so I quickly pivoted and started thinking about, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
What else am I good at? Finding your passion, other ways so that you can survive, right? I mean, there were some things that was happening in my life that, hey, I needed to get out and get a job at the time, right? I never aspired to become a CEO, but I knew I needed to survive, right? I knew I couldn't go live off my father, who was raising me at the time. I needed to get out and work and be independent and self-sufficient. And so I needed to quickly to find a job. And back then, working for one of the big companies was what a lot of us in college aspired to do, right? And so for me, it was General Motors. And what I got excited about initially was the fact that, hey, GM was the #1 car company in the world. That stuck, that rung a bell with me. It was like, wow, I'm going to go work for the #1 car company in the world, right? That was a big deal for me, right? I felt like, hey, you know what? If I'm going to work for a car company, why not go work for the biggest, right? And then over time, you go through the process and you start to learn what you're really good at, right? And you start to sharpen that skill set. And that's, over time, 34 years later, I end up in the position that I am today.
Did you know that 96% of the people who watch videos on this channel are not subscribed? Do me a favor. Subscribe to this YouTube channel so that you can get access to more videos just like this. It literally takes you 1 second and it helps the channel quite a lot. So what do you do in that situation? Because a lot of people might be wondering, okay, so like to me, I'm thinking of sort of like a formula, right? And so what comes to mind, and I always talk about this, is this idea of paying attention to the signs that you have in your life. Not like some weird spiritual, or religious thing, but, signs that what the market is telling you, what people are telling you. So to me, it sounds like what you're saying is following your passion plus paying attention to the signs is what's going to guide your career path going forward. But if you don't have those two elements in there, then you can get thrown off track. So for example, if you only follow signs, but you're not passionate about anything, then you're going to be stuck in a job that might pay you well, but you're not really invested in it. Similarly, if you only follow your passion till the ends of the earth, you're probably not going to make a career. You're not going to be successful in that area if you're not paying attention to what the market is telling you. So it seems like passion plus following those signs is a good combination. But what do you do with that passion then? So in your case, right, you're very passionate about basketball. You knew you weren't going to be an NBA player. You went into the automotive space. Did the passion just die for basketball, or do you still, like, I'm a big believer in saying bring your passion with you to whatever it is that you do. So for example, if you're passionate about basketball, it's this idea of competitiveness, of trying to win, of scoring points, and bringing that same mentality and those concepts and those ideas into the work that you're doing. So using those analogies and
no, Jacob, you're answering the question. Because playing basketball taught me all of those things, right? A, competing. B, winning. C, being part of a winning organization. 4, teamwork. 5, establishing trust, right? And then 6, making people around you better. All of those skill sets, playing basketball translates into the everyday workforce, right? Yeah. My job as a leader, and I'll never forget one of my former leaders, Carlos Ghosn. I know there's a lot of controversy.
Yeah, I saw his documentary on Apple TV had a documentary about him. My wife and I watched the whole.
Exactly. But he said something to me, way back when that I thought was really, really profound. He said, Randy, as leaders, we've got to get people to do things that they never thought they were capable of doing with enthusiasm. And when he said that to me, that really stuck. And to this day, it sticks. It's as if you and I are sitting here talking to each other, right? To me, that's what being a great coach is all about. Playing basketball teaches you all of these things. It teaches you coaching, how to be a good listener, how to be a player that listens, or I should say, a player that's coachable, right? Because we all have bosses, right? I have a boss, but being coachable is really important. That's a skill set that you learn. Being part of a team. I mean, this is 34 years later, and my teammates and I get together every year for a TCU basketball reunion, and we're still in a group chat to this day, because these are my brothers at arms. I mean, these are the guys that I went to war with every single day in practice and in the games. And it didn't matter the color of skin, it didn't matter their ethnicity, their background, their financial, it mattered not at the end of the day, and it still doesn't matter. I would give these guys the shirt off my back. Those skill sets you can translate into the everyday workforce, right? If you talk to people that work for me, I'll give them the shirt off my back. I'll never ask them to do things that I wouldn't do myself, right? And my job is to motivate those people, those individuals, those employees to do things
Yep.
that they never thought that they were capable of. And I can tell you factually that my current boss, our global COO, Jose Munoz, does that for me every single day. He challenges me to be better. He challenges me to over deliver and overperform. He challenges me to do things that I never thought I could do. And you know what? That's one of the reasons why I'm sitting here today, right?
Yeah.
But also what he does is that, he does genuinely care about me as well. He cares about me, my welfare, my family. He's met my family. He's spent time with my family. These are the skill sets that you learn over time as a leader, right? And for me, that's very motivating. Our executive chair is another good example. He leads through example. His vision for the company is progress or making progress for humanity, okay? How does he do that? He's investing in the future. He's investing in things that are coming around the corner that we may or may not necessarily use. But you know what? He's trying to anticipate where the market is going.
Yeah.
And so as an employee of the company, that's very refreshing and motivating for me because he's progressive. He's moving the company forward. He's turning Hyundai from a traditional mobility company, but into a mobility solutions company by investing in electrification, by investing in connectivity, by investing in autonomous vehicles, by investing in robotics, by investing in flying taxis. I mean, these are the things that motivate me and want me to come to work every single day because I'm working for an executive chair who's pushing the company forward.
Let's talk a little bit about...
So all of those skill sets, all of those things are really, really important in terms of motivation, leadership. And I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no. That's great. I wanted to talk a little bit about what it takes to get into a leadership role. This comes up a lot, at least for me, if I'm giving a talk somewhere and somebody asks me about what I think about return to the office versus working from home. And oftentimes when employees ask me this question, I say, well, it depends on what your goals are. So for example, if you have aspirations of becoming a leader in your company or an executive at your company, do I believe that you will get there quicker and that you will get more value out of being in the office? Yes. Do I believe that there's more value being around your leaders, where your leaders can see you, where you can talk to them, where you can learn from them, get coached by them in person? Yes. However, if you don't care about that and you are content being in the role that you're in and maybe progressing gradually over a very long period of time, and you don't have that kind of killer mindset of wanting to win and get to that level, hey, stay working from home forever, right? That's your choice. But for people who are interested, and I'm assuming that would be most people listening and watching to this who are interested in getting into leadership and senior leadership, can you give people some idea of what did it take from you to get there? What sacrifices did you make? How many hours did you put in? Did you work weekends? Were you in the office early in the mornings? Were you staying late? Like what did it take to get into this role of being CEO? Or did you just kind of, coast in there and it was just kind of, not too bad for you?
I love how you put it. Did I just coast in there? No, I don't think there was any coasting. But let me just say this. First and foremost, leaders aren't born. Leaders are made over time based on successes and failures over time. And as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, I've been doing this now for 34 years. And I'm as passionate about the automobile space today as I was, say, 34 years ago. Mm-hmm. But I've got a lot more experiences, right? And you're 100% correct. It didn't come without a lot of sacrifices. On several different occasions, and I think I can count about 4, maybe even 5 times, I lived separately without my family because I wanted to keep options open for me, okay? I'm never the type of person that's going to stay home and work from the office because, to your point, there's a lot of value in that daily face-to-face interaction. If you're going to lead, you've got to be able to lead from the front. You can't lead from the back and be at home on the couch. You got to be here and show up every single day. When the pandemic hit, if I'm not mistaken, it happened in the month of March of 2021, if I'm not mistaken, right? If I got the dates right.
I think it was 2020.
2020. Okay,
Yeah,
2020,
2020 or
March of
2021.
2020.
I think it was 2020.
Okay, all right. Let's just say it was March of 2020. Labor Day, after Labor Day weekend, I was back in the office full time, and there was only a couple of people here, myself, our global COO, because I wanted to be here every single day and lead from the front. And I recognize people, couldn't come to the office at the time because of protocol, but I wanted to be here, right? I just didn't feel like I was in my element, and so I do think you got to show up differently if you want to someday lead a big organization and be a leader of big teams. But as I mentioned, leaders are developed over time, right? And it's through experiences. I mean, think about it. 34 years in the auto industry. I worked for 3 different car companies. I've relocated 14 times.
What,
I've lived in 4
14
different
times?
states. 14 times I
Wow.
relocated. 14 times, okay? I lived in 4 different states: Texas, Michigan, California, Tennessee, and I also worked abroad for 2 years in Japan. So to me, that adds, as a leader, you have to have credibility, right? When I speak, I want to make sure that people say, you know what, this guy knows what the hell he's talking about, right? He knows the auto industry. He's got a passion for this, but yet not only does he have a passion for it, but he understands the business, and so that adds the credibility, because if you want people to follow you, you've got to be credible. You got to establish trust, right? There's a lot of different competencies over time that you need to develop that I don't think you're born with.
Yeah.
It develops over time, right? And I could sit here and list out every single competency in no particular order and say, hey, you've got to be an effective communicator. You've got to be an expert problem solver. You've got to be a motivator. You've got to be a great coach. You've got to be a great listener. You've got to be empathetic. All those things are really, really important, right? You got to establish great boss relationships. I mean, these are skill sets that you learn over time. They're just not handed to you. You can read about them, but you've got to be able to apply those in the everyday world. And I think over time, that's what I've been able to do. And again, it didn't come without great sacrifice.
Yeah.
I'm still married. I'm 32 years in now, happily married. I've got 3 beautiful kids. They're highly educated and very successful, and so on and so forth. But it didn't come without sacrifices. I didn't make every practice. I didn't make every game. I didn't make every volleyball game or soccer game or basketball game. But I tried to stay connected as much as I could, by the use of technology, through communication. We never felt like as a family we were that far apart. So you have to make an effort even in that space to ensure that, back home things are working perfectly as much as they can be, and at the same time staying focused on your career and building your career. But it didn't come without any great sacrifices.
So let's unpack that a little bit more, because you did touch on a few things, right? So you didn't make every game, you didn't go to every practice. There were a couple times where you had to live separate from your family because you were so focused on work and having to do the things that you needed to do. But even earlier on in your career, how many hours a week were you putting in, and how many hours a week do you put in now? Were there times when you worked for a leader who was just treating you terribly and you had to stick it out and tough it out, and he would yell at you or she would yell at you or take credit for your work and, make you do things that you didn't want to do, and you just had to kind of, power through it? Were there times when you had to work on the weekends, when you had to be up and, take those late night calls, those early morning meetings? Were there, did you have to do all of those things to get into this role? Because I still think that a lot of people assume that they can just, work 8 to 5 or 8 to 4. They're pretty good at their job, right? They're competent. They're being able to do the things that they're supposed to do. And simply by going along that path, they assume that they should be in a senior leadership or an executive role. But they forget that there are hundreds, and in a big company, thousands of people who are doing that exact same thing, who are also high performers, who are also working 8 to 5, but they're not pushing beyond. They're not standing out even more. So how do you break from that pack? Because obviously you were in a role, lots of big companies. There were lots of other leaders, lots of other mid-level leaders, lots of other entry-level employees, but somehow you kept rising above your peers and going up and up. So what did you have to do? And can we unpack some of those sacrifices a little bit more around what it took?
Sure. I think the relevant differentiating benefit, the RDB, my RDB, right, is having that intuit factor. how I show up every single day. Being able to do the things that are required to make sure that the company and your customers that you're successful. When you're working for a global company, let's just say, and I'll give you a couple of examples. When I was working for a company that was based out of Japan, there were times when I was on video conference calls at 12, 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. There were times when I would literally have conference calls or Zoom calls with leadership in Japan at 8 o'clock in the morning. They would go to sleep, and then at 8 o'clock at night, my time, after they've woken up, I'd have meetings with them again. And yet I still haven't gone home and gone to sleep yet, right? So being able to absorb that blow, if you will, right? Because you're gonna get hit repeatedly over and over and over and over again. And being able to absorb those body blows, take it in stride, and still show up and have that intuit factor every single day is something that a lot of people just simply don't have. A former boss of mine once said to me, he says, either have it or you don't. It's a certain je ne sais quoi, he said to me, right? And I thought it was kind of funny. He was like, hey, what's je ne sais quoi? Either have it or you don't, he said. But I think what he was really trying to say is that there's certain competencies that you have to master in order to get to this level. Endurance, as an example. I just gave you a really good example of having that stamina and that endurance to be able to absorb those type of body blows where you've got to work the entire day and not necessarily get a lot of sleep. You've got to be able to wake up at 2 in the morning because you've got a Zoom call at 3 with someone else in a different country. If you're not willing to make those sacrifices, that's okay. I don't have any problem with individual contributors who want to stay at home and work from home and just be good contributors to the company, because we need those type of steady Eddie employees. There's nothing wrong with those employees. In fact, I envy those employees because remember we talked about finding your passion, what makes you happy. If that gives you the right balance in your life and you're happy, you're going to be very productive, in my opinion. So you can still be a successful individual contributor working from home, but you may not necessarily become a CEO. And that's okay, because everybody can't become a CEO, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't ask people to follow my journey. But if you want to become a CEO, if you want to become a C-suite leader at some point in time, you always need to keep your options open. Yes, you're going to have to be willing to make some sacrifices, and you're going to have to show up differently every single day versus your peers.
If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably interested in excelling in your career. You're probably interested in trying to figure out how to become a better leader, how to engage your employees, how to create a future-ready organization. Now, this podcast might get you some of the way there, but if you're interested in stepping up your game even further, then I invite you to head over to greatleadership.substack.com. Join the community of tens of thousands of people from around the world who are getting weekly insights, CEO interviews, in-depth articles that I write, bonus leadership hacks from best-selling authors and CEOs around the world. All of this content is available at greatleadership.substack.com. Did you also work for leaders who were not, what's a nice way of putting it, less desirable leaders, right? I mean, you didn't always work for kind-hearted, loving, it's okay, Randy, go take time off and be with your family. Randy, you look tired. I'm sure you worked for some leaders at some point early on in your career who were like, Andy, shut up. I don't care. So did you work, and I don't know, you don't need to name names, obviously, but are there any stories that come to mind of just some of the challenges that you've had to get through of working for tough leaders? Because to me, it seems like a lot of the times now, if people work for a leader, they almost get offended that the leader asks them to do more. They almost get offended if they have a bad day at work. And I think people confuse not liking a day or a certain job that you're doing with not liking your career. I mean, even in what I do, right? Speaking, content creation, books, there are aspects of what I do that I do not love. It doesn't mean that I don't like the job as a whole, but there are some aspects of the job that I find tedious, that I would rather not do, but I still have to do. And it almost seems like for some people today, if there's one aspect of the job that they don't like, they're kind of like, oh, this isn't for me, right? I'm supposed to love 100% of everything. So any stories that come to mind for you of some of either the leaders that you've worked with or the things that you had to kind of grit your way through?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that playing basketball and athletics taught me early on, right? Because your basketball coaches can be extremely tough, really, really, really tough. I mean, how else can you explain running, wind sprints on a football field in 110-degree weather? Let's
Ooh,
just say, right? And do it with enthusiasm, right? That because they're pushing you, and so everybody can't play at that level, right? It's like I said earlier, everybody can't make it to the NBA. Everybody can't play D1 basketball, let's just say. You want to, but you don't necessarily, you can't necessarily always get there because you may not have those other intangibles that we just talked about, right? First of all, you got to have tough skin. No matter what you do, you got to have tough skin. There are a lot of people that don't, and that's okay. How do you get those people through tough moments is what's really, really important. I can't sit here and tell you that I ever played for someone or worked for someone that I didn't like. Seriously, I don't know, maybe I'm lucky that way, but yes, I've had some extremely difficult coaches. I've had extremely challenging bosses and mentors who were very, very tough on me, right? But they always did it from a very good space because they knew that I could do more. They knew that I was capable of doing more. They knew I could deliver more. And you know what? I'm just competitive that way to begin with, right? I want to shine. I want to perform. I want to deliver. And if I don't deliver, I feel like I'm disappointing the people that are mentoring me and have supported me over time. And so for me, I love being successful. I love, again, seeing my name in lights. That's really important. Call it arrogance, call it one of the 7 deadly sins of pride. But I like to win. I simply like to win. Conversely, I hate to lose.
Oh, I'm the same way.
But I don't get fixated on winning. I get fixated on the process of being successful. If I miss a number, if I miss a KPI, what could I have done better, right? What did I do wrong? Did I have the right strategy in place? Am I motivating my people enough? Did I have the right plan in place? Did I give my team the right resources? Because I can't be successful if my people aren't successful, if my dealers aren't successful, right? So for me, it's about being successful, but willing to show up every single day and perform and deliver. That's a competency that I think I won't say I've mastered it, but I've gotten really good at it over time. And so, Jacob, to answer your question specifically, I've never, again, been coached by someone I didn't like. Yeah, they were tough, and they called me every name in the book. I've never worked for someone that I didn't like or wasn't tough. I mean, every boss I've had was actually, tough in their own way, and they always challenged me in their own way. But you know what? They shaped me. They all have shaped me and molded me into what I am today. And I appreciate every person I've ever played for and worked for because they made me who I am today.
And I wouldn't call that arrogance or ego at all. I mean, I think everybody likes to win. When I play competitive sports or when I do anything, I love to win. I don't know anybody out there who says, oh, you know what, I enjoy losing. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I wouldn't call that arrogance at all. I think that's just the, kind of a competitive spirit, which is important for a lot of people. And so I'm curious.
It's important for me.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's important for me. I try to instill that in my kids as well. My dad instilled that in me when I was younger too. And I think it's important, especially for career success and trajectory. So how do you balance, that for yourself with what you demand from other people, right? Because I think that's something a lot of leaders struggle with, right? As the CEO, you're always going to care more and you're always going to do more than everyone else around you. But at the same time, you want people to perform, but you also can't demand that from them, right? I mean, you can't demand your people have those 3 a.m. meetings. You can't demand that your people, live a day or two away from their family. So how do you balance your competitiveness and your demand and expectations from yourself as a leader with what you demand from people who work with and for you that maybe are not willing or able to give what you're able to give?
Understood. I call it the Tommy Lasorda effect. Tommy Lasorda was by far one of the greatest general managers of baseball. The question is why? What made Tommy Lasorda so special? And one thing that Tommy was really, really good at is that he could tailor his coaching style to each individual player. There's some coaches that do it the opposite way. They call you a number. Hey, number 35, I need you over here. Hey, number 16, why'd you do this? Hey, number 7, you're doing this wrong. Tommy Lasorda was the opposite. He knew what every individual person's capabilities were, right? And he could put that team together in a way that made them successful, that made them a winning organization. He knew Johnny over here, this guy, he's only motivated if you kick him in the pants, right? And then he elevates his game. But Steve over here needs a little bit more coddling, right? He had a tougher upbringing. He may not have had a father, whatever. But Tommy knew all of that about his players. And so he could tailor his coaching style to each individual player. And I thought that's what made him really, really special and made him successful. And I try to do the exact same thing, right? Because, again, on a team of 5, let's use basketball as an example, you might have a Michael Jordan on your team, but the other 4 players may be role players, right? They may want to be like Michael Jordan, but they don't have the skill set. So how do you motivate those guys to ensure that you're creating a winning organization, right? And I try to do that, here in the building as well, because everybody is completely different. Everybody's motivated by different things. As a leader, it's my job to walk the floor, sit in meetings, observe the behaviors of our employees, and try to tailor my coaching style to each one of those individuals on my team.
It reminds me of a lot of what John Wooden did when he was the coach of UCLA men's basketball team, right? That was his approach. He had his pyramid of success, and he was very famous for getting to know all of his ball players as human beings, not just as basketball players. And he would have dinner with them. He would know their families.
That's a good example.
Yeah, he would know everything about them, and then he would design plays on the court so that even if you were a weak player, but you had one strength and you could only make the ball from one spot on the court, he would design plays so that everybody would revolve around you, so that during the game you would get the ball on that spot of the court so you can make the basket. Because he knew that you can't have everybody who's an all-star. So it reminds me of, I got to look up more about Tommy Lasorda's coaching style, but it reminds me very much of John Wooden and what he did.
Very similar, very similar. Conversely, there's other coaches out there like Bill Walsh that did it the other way, right? He knew all his players by number. That was it. He didn't care about your family per se. But you know what? He was still successful. And I think individuals can play for a Bill Walsh, but can't play for a Tommy Lasorda, and vice versa. There's some that can play for Lasorda, but can't play for a Bill Walsh. And so it's about fit. Again, going back to what we said earlier, culture. I try to create a culture and a esprit de corps in this building that everybody can show up as individuals, right? They bring that diversity to work, right? And we can all learn from each other, right? I'm only as good as my team. I'm only as good as my dealer partners. And if my dealers aren't motivated, if my team isn't motivated, we're not going to be successful. I can't do this alone, right? Yeah. And so my job is to help build a good team and then get everyone motivated to achieve success.
Okay, makes sense. So let's shift gears a little bit to the section I like to call the Leader's Toolkit. And we're going to talk about this idea of building a personal brand, which I honestly can't even remember the last time an executive, a CEO brought this up, but I think it's a hugely important topic. And it's interesting because if I were to remember 10, 15, 20 years ago, there were lots of stories where employees and organizations, they weren't allowed to build a personal brand on social media. Like you could get fired because your brand was getting bigger than the company brand. And there are several stories that I remember hearing about, 15, 20 years ago. And now building a personal brand is, kind of back in fashion, back in style. So why is it so important for people, especially those who want to get into leadership, to build a personal brand? And how do you do it? Are we talking about just like posting on social media? Like what are the steps that you take to build a personal brand, and why should you do it? All right, everyone, my conversation with Randy Parker continues as we talk about how to build a personal brand. This is only available for subscribers of Great Leadership Plus on Apple Podcasts. And in this bonus conversation, we're going to talk about what it means to build a personal brand, why it's so important for you to do so, and how to actually do it, and some of the things that Randy has done over the course of his career to build his personal brand. It's really a fascinating and interesting conversation, adds a ton of value to your leadership career, especially if you're looking to get into that mid and senior leadership level role. This is only, again, available for subscribers to Great Leadership Plus on Apple Podcasts. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with somebody who you would like to see become a better leader. And I encourage you to also join our email community. That's greatleadership.substack.com/GL podcast if you want to get a 20% discount. There's a free version. If you want the discount, I gave you the URL for where you can go to get that. And also, if you want to grab a copy of my new book, Leading with Vulnerability, go to leadwithvulnerability.com. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week.